Some of my favorite video games growing up were PlayStation classics. This includes things like Sly Cooper, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon. Those kind of games in the early to mid 2000s were kind of like the peak of 3D platformers, and that was something that I really enjoyed. After a couple of years, I started to grow out of those games, and the new generation of PlayStation consoles came out, so I just sold them, kind of forgot about the platformers altogether. As the years went on, I wanted to play these games again. So I started to look for them on things like Amazon and stuff like that, but being in my early teenage years and not really having a job, I didn't have the money to buy a PlayStation 2 to be able to play these old games. Come post Christmas of 2012, I went to GameStop with my mom to spend my usual post Christmas money. I was scanning the aisles of the PS3 section to find a set of games I had on PS2, but with updated graphics and released for the PS3. That was something that I'd never seen before, just re-releasing the same game on another platform. I continued to look through those aisles, and I saw Ratchet & Clank and the God of War series, a collection of games that I had heard about, but I had never played before. Some people will call these remakes, but there's a very big distinction between what a remake is and what a remaster is. A remastered video game is just the game, but with updated graphics so it doesn't look like a piece of shit on an LCD TV. Remasters are also fairly common with movies. That's why they can get a Blu-ray version of Robert Rodriguez's Shark Boy and Lava Girl without having to track down Taylor Lautner and squeeze him into that prosthetic shark suit that he can't fit into anymore because he's absolutely shredded. These are a lot easier and a lot cheaper to do, so this is why this is the more common way to re-release a game or a movie. However, some games that are especially beloved get the remake treatment, which is building the entire game once again from the ground up, making new assets, making new levels, adding new features, stuff like that. This is a lot more expensive, so studios usually try not to do these. They will do it if it's a really beloved game that they know is going to make a lot of money. It's very similar to what we've seen recently with the Crash N. Sane trilogy and the Spyro Reignited trilogy, but can also lead back to games like Pokemon Fire Red, which just remade the original Pokemon Red for Game Boy. These remade games, a lot of times, go cross-platform. The original Spyro and Crash games were only available for PlayStation consoles, but now you can get them on PlayStation, Xbox, Switch. I think there's a PC port too. This garnered a wider audience for games that some people believed were the greatest 3D platformers of all time. After Mario 64, of course, which had its own remake for the Nintendo DS, making it one of the most confusing re-released video game titles of all time. Now, one thing that kind of confused me about the re-releases was the theory of it all. Obviously, the studios just want to make money. Why would a company want to spend money to remake a game that already has discs out in the wild? Why not just make it so you can play the old discs on new platforms? The 7th generation of consoles had actually thought about this in the early stages of development. The PS3 originally shipped with a disk drive that could not only read PlayStation 3 discs, but also could play PS2 and PS1 games natively. This meant that any old games that you hadn't sold to GameStop for 20 cents and half a Subway footlong would work right out of the box. The Xbox 360 worked the same way, but had a specific list of games that would work. The list was constantly updated until November of 2007, where Microsoft kept the final list of compatible games. Both consoles offered digital versions of the original games for a reduced price. This worked out for a while, but unfortunately, because of all the extra hardware that they had to put into the PS3,
in North America, the PlayStation 3 will be available at retail on November 17th, 2006. The 20 gigabyte PlayStation 3 will retail for $499 US and 549 Canadian dollars.
They had to upscale the price of that original fat PS3 to $600 at launch. To compare, the PS4 at launch was only $400, and the Xbox 360, the generation competitor to Sony, launched at $300, nearly half the price. Eventually, the price of the PS3 did go down, but with the second version of the console, they managed to remove the backwards compatibility function entirely. Thus was the beginning of the remasters that Sony became the master of. Microsoft was still doing backwards compatibility, not that that was the main draw of the console anymore. The 360 was all around the better console, with the superior online functionality, the better price, better online games, and a lack of a huge hacking scandal from 2011. The only thing Xbox didn't really have was the hunk of a man known as Nathan Drake. Xbox is still doing backwards compatibility now with the Xbox One. I had one in early college and got to play the original Borderlands games without any issues. I think the most I had to do was download a 500 megabyte update, and I was on my way. The game was natively upscaled to 1080p, which is fine for the game I was playing. I think they also did this for all the other games available for backwards compatibility. Sony, on the other hand, did not have any backwards compatibility this generation, but still had ways to make older games available to the newest console. The first way was, just like the PS3, they had some older games available to buy digitally. I don't think they updated the graphics or anything, and depending on the original system, I think they looked fine at 720p. Most of them were pretty cheap, costing between $5 and $15, since just uploading the playable file online. These were mainly games like the original Final Fantasy games. Like, look at the polygons on Squall here. The next one was the digital remasters. These usually had a little bit of extra work done to them, so they would lock at 1080p at 60 FPS. These were a bit more premium, running at $30 for some of them, and some priced all the way at $60 for a new price game. These include things like the Nathan Drake Collection, and another underappreciated game that I loved growing up, The Legend of Kay Remastered. The final and probably most interesting for the time is PlayStation Now. This was one of the first forays into cloud-based gaming, where games would be streamed to your console, kind of like Netflix. You would pay a flat rate for the service every month and had quite a few games to play. And some of them normally would have cost like $40 or $50 otherwise. There were a few problems with this system. First was the latency. Unless you had a really good internet connection, there would be a considerable amount of lag between what you input into the controller and what actually showed up on the screen. This lag was really bad when I tried it, which really put a damper when I tried to play Dark Souls 2. The second thing is that even though they had some good games, there was an entire library that was bragged about that includes obscure games that nobody has ever heard of. The platform brags about over 800 games, but people are probably only interested in about 50 of them. Sure, you could play games like Rainbow Six Siege and Hello Neighbor, but you also have to sift through games like Handball 2016. But my biggest issue with the service is the wait times. I think it had something to do with the size of the servers running the games, or there was a ridiculous number of people playing the same games I wanted to play. But there were often times where I would try to load up a game and I would have to wait in line for someone else to quit the game to make room on the server for me. I tried to look up more accounts of waiting in line, but could only find a few Reddit posts talking about it. So maybe it wasn't a huge problem as I thought it was. Either way, it was kind of a damper on what I wanted to play. Though Microsoft has done backwards compatibility for some of their games, that doesn't mean that they don't practice the same money-grubbing ideas that Sony does. Xbox too allows you to buy older Xbox games digitally with no updated graphics for a lower price, as well as remastering some of their prettier IPs, like the Halo Master Chief Collection and the Rare Replay Collection. They've even got their own cloud-based gaming service in Xbox Game Pass. However, every single thing about Game Pass is just superior to PlayStation Now. For starters, any game that you want that's available on the Pass becomes your game as long as you have the service. You don't have to stream the game, you download it to your console and play it natively on your hardware. That in itself is amazing because it doesn't matter how good your Wi-Fi connection in your house or apartment complex is, you will always be able to play the game regardless. The games on the service are also really good. Though they don't have the ability to brag about having 800 games available, they have something like 100 or so, and most of them are actually good. Games like the Gears of War series, the Sea of Thieves, and even Red Dead Redemption 2 are available on Game Pass. The biggest and best part about it is the availability. With PS Now, you really were limited to playing it on PS4. Like, you could hook it up to your computer, but there was a ton of different hoops you had to jump through for it. With Game Pass, you could pay a smaller fee and be able to download those games directly to your PC. I have that option, that's why I've been able to recently play through Sunset Overdrive and catch up on the Gears of War series. For playing on Xbox, there's even a deal that has Game Pass included with your Xbox Live subscription. So you could be paying 15 bones a month in order to play Sea of Thieves online with your friends and have it streamed without even having to pay for it. Most of the older games I played growing up aren't as good as I thought. Like, now that I've replayed them on updated hardware, now I realize they don't look amazing and have some really noticeable playability flaws, but I love the games because of how many times I played them growing up. Thanks to the remaster of the games on PS3, I got to relearn why I loved the games and figure out why I didn't really like them in the first place. Though I think it would have been cheaper for backwards compatibility, I see why Sony stopped producing that kind of hardware. Luckily, for the first few months of new game releases, it looks like some of the new consoles of the next generation are going to be allowing backwards compatibility with some digital games. Like, if I buy the new Horizon Zero Dawn game on PS4, they're going to be able to update it to PS5 for free. One thing that's important to point out, though, is that the PS5 is also launching with a discless version, which is probably going to be the cheaper option and the easier one for people to understand. With this kind of marketing, in the long run, it's probably going to make disc-based gameplay obsolete, completely killing the idea of backwards compatible games. Only time is going to be able to tell though, so for now, I'd hang on to that copy of NBA 2K19. Alright, and that's everything. Thank you guys for watching. I still have fun writing these things and filming these. I'm racking my brain a little bit to try to come up with different ideas for things that I can do. If you have any suggestions, comment them down below. Follow me on Twitter. I'll also link any other social media down in the description, like my Twitch channel and my website and things like that. If you have any other questions, let me know. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you guys on the next one.